But I don't want him to go back and tell them that I spent 6 months travelling overseas this year, but I think they all know. And we're very busy at Wesley, because Wesley next year will be 150 years old. And so I've had a long stint working with the archives and the art collection there, which is a marvellous thing. But I really have switched my life over, now that I've crossed the great mark of 50, to travelling the world, leading international tours, and actually going around the world lecturing on small cruise ships and doing all sorts of very interesting things, and I've really crafted a life which I absolutely love. But I do love coming back to Melbourne, and that ABC radio personality by the name of Fane, you may have heard him, he has an opinion or two, once asked me on radio, "Why do you travel so much, Kenneth?" with a cynical look on his face. I said, "Thank you for that simple question, the pleasure of returning to Melbourne." Now, anyway, let's applaud whatever you like. I'm not running for office. Actually, I ran into Malcolm Turnbull on the street last week. I was leading a walking tour. And I had a group of 20 people, including an 11-year-old who was dragged along by his aunt, and he didn't really want to be there, but after he joined the walk and I'd sort of focused every question on him, he was engaged. And Malcolm Turnbull appeared, he was going to Tasman Terrace to get a coffee, and it was interesting because the kid went up to take the photograph, and he was shy, and I'm yelling out top of my voice, go on, he's a politician, he'll kiss a baby, he'll do anything." Anyway, the security personnel rushed over and grabbed the kid and took him over. And Malcolm was posing for photographs with everybody. We caught up with him at the coffee shop, and I thought, what the heck, I'll behave like a groupie. I just said, "Prime Minister." And there was silence, went right through the whole place. I said, "Congratulations, do a good job for us." And you know, there were builders, labourers, there were all sorts of characters. Everyone broke into applause. And I'm not going to, this is not a political event. And, but I actually it was interesting. It was very, very interesting, because everyone was laughing, and we won't be there next week because we changed our Prime Ministers. But he actually, we walked back and I stopped the group and I said, "Look, irrespective of your political persuasion, it's just interesting that there's a change. Let's hope it's for the better. Whatever happens, whatever your political viewpoints, the opposition will have to lift its game, and so will the government. So hopefully we're the beneficiaries. And when they go about all this sort of rubbish about politicians being dumped and whatever, that's politics. Anyway, that's not my speech, but anyway, I digress. Up on the wall, there's a lovely image of a Byzantine image of the Madonna and Child. Why have I put that up there? Because I know I'm in a room of religious scholars. I put that there because it's all in the art of experience. Travel broadens the mind. And indeed, you can go to the University of Melbourne and lead a great academic career, but that's really only part of the story. You have to get off your bottom and go out and see the world and do things. That image is typical of the icon-type images that you see in the Orthodox Church. But what is really wonderful is when you travel and you see something interpreted in a different way. A friend of mine was in Turkey a few months ago. She went to a little monastery on an island in the Black Sea and looked at a very image like that with the Madonna and Child and read the caption underneath it. It wasn't Madonna and Child, Madonna with infant Jesus. It was simply described as Mary and the King. And I wondered how Jesus would think about that, but in a way, it's a lovely story. Just remember, I would say to these groups today, because I know you're Googlers, and I get really annoyed when I'm on tour and people are actually using their mobile phones and say, "Kenneth, but yeah, on Google it says this." And there are quite a few churches I've seen around the world say they have signs on the outside saying, "Google does not offer all the answers. Come inside." You do need, as all good students should know, you need to go to a variety of sources to test your theory. I have led many tours and I've heard many stupid questions. This is a replica of the Titanic staircase. I was once on a ship and I was asked by a lady who obviously had one or two drinks, "Does that staircase go up or down?" I said, "Why don't you be brave and try?" Or indeed, there we have an ice sculpture. Are there any Americans in the audience? Half. Oh well, we won't hold that against you. An American lady on a cruise ship, this is one of my favourite stories, observed the ice sculpture and went and asked the cruise directors, what do you do with the ice sculpture after it melts? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Sea Cloud 2, and I spent a delightful month bobbing around the Caribbean at the early part of the year. And it was the most fantastic experience. I was guest lecturer on board the ship, and I've actually switched to work, really, a lot of my work is now with AEPT, a very long and established company, but they have a special small ship brand, and I am the resident guest lecturer, so I get to pick what cruises I go on. So naturally I chose that one. And we sailed from the Pacific side of the central part of the Americas, from Costa Rica, around through the Panama Canal all the way to Cuba. And it was the most wonderful trip. Imagine going through the Panama Canal under motor, not under sail, in a sailing ship like that, and our mast virtually tickling the bridges that actually were above our head. I love experiences, that's why I travel so much. And indeed, you would think that was somewhere like Hong Kong or Shanghai. That's the city of Panama, Panama City. It's a powerhouse. And the only way you discover these things is by going on a trip. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an image of the site that many of you may have, some of you may have been to, Chichen Itza, which is in the Yucatan Peninsula. This is when they've discovered the temple and they're just clearing off the vegetation to reveal this extraordinary monument. And this is what I like doing. I love going out into the jungle and discovering. When you go into the jungle of the Yucatan and Belize and whatever, you actually you can climb to the top of a temple and you can look over and you can see these bumps everywhere. All these bumps are basically temples which are still yet to be cleaned and revealed to humanity. This is a lighting effect that they've done on the side of the great temple, and it shows what looks like a serpent slithering down the side of the temple, which is very powerful emotive symbol for the Mayan people who were very much on that Yucatan Peninsula, which is now, of course, in Mexico. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an image of an elderly person being fed intoxicants. This is something that Graduate House likes to aspire to, but it's a wonderful. When I read the caption of this, I had to put it in. And it simply reads, elderly Mayan being fed intoxicants. That's the way to go through the twilight of your lives, slightly bemused and confused. Don't let it worry you, just go with the flow. We ended up in the beautiful city of Havana, which has been dramatically transformed with the opening up and the establishment of the US Embassy, both in Havana and, of course, now the Cubans have their embassy in Washington, D.C., with these remarkable reminders of the effects of the blockade, which occurred, of course, once Fidel Castro had taken over. And it's very interesting to see how Cuba is engaged and worked with the Pope, and the Pope playing that sort of interesting role in joining the bridge between America and Cuba. And you think back to the Pope and his contribution to the freedom of Poland. That role. Sometimes you are really delighted to see how people in that position can make a really transformative move. Cuba is famous for its cigars, and it's famous for its wonderful sugar-based liquors, such as a mojito or there's several you could have, margaritas, etc. And Il Floridita is one of the most famous bars where anybody likes to go. And Ernest Hemingway did go to that bar one day and drank, I think it was 28 margaritas in one session. He survived. Sadly for Ernest Hemingway, he ended up going back to America, and he did himself in the middle of the American Midwest, which might say something about the Midwest. Anyway, it's an amazing city, and it's a city which is opening up to the world, especially now that America's become involved. Beautiful colonial cathedral in the Baroque style, transplanted into the heart of this, what used to be a Spanish possession. And a wonderful image showing Watson and the shark. Now this is the sort of thing that would happen if you went paddling in Sydney Harbour, as we all know. But this is an image of a young sailor who falls out of a longboat and falls into the harbour of Havana, and a shark comes along and chops off his leg. Unfortunate, you would say. Well, he recovered, Lord knows how, and ended up going to London and would rise to the noble rank of Lord Mayor of London. And it's a wonderful, evocative painting which you can see in many versions, the most famous being in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. When I travel, I like to collect signs. Eating carpet is strictly prohibited, a very informative sign at an Indian airport. So you go to stand on the carpet, eating carpet, strictly prohibited. It's like my dear friend, years ago, a dear friend of mine and I were in India and we did the airport security check-in. They've had that very complicated security check-in in India for many, many decades since the separation, the partition and the creation of India and the states on either side. And we had a very vigorous frisk. And I looked around and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "That was so enjoyable, I'm going to do it again." And all the Indian security officials were just rolling over and laughing. I love India. I sailed around from Chennai all the way to Mumbai earlier this year. Before entering the factory, wash your hands and legs neatly, ladies and gentlemen. And this delightful image, these boys are clearly sitting. Kindly avoid sitting here. I just love the eyes on the young man. It was just a priceless moment. But then you get to somewhere like Sri Lanka, which is now starting to open up to the world in a bigger way. I hope they can resolve the internal conflicts. That would be several lectures in its own right. This is the famous fortress of Sigiriya, one of the great ancient kingdoms. Some of you may have travelled to here. It's a great rock with a series of beautiful caves and structures on top of the rock, surrounded by very well laid out grounds, as you can see. In the middle there is the citadel, and they've got these wonderful grounds around it. One of the World Heritage Sites. And you make your way up the staircase, and at the very top you feel safe if you've made it. And on the way you'll see some of the most beautiful wall paintings. A rich culture, which of course was corrupted in a way and affected by the arrival of the Europeans, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and of course later on the British. And Sri Lanka is still trying to find its own place, but it's a wonderful part of the world. And that's looking from the top of the rock itself. Absolutely marvellous, the view from the top. It's worth the climb. In the city of Colombo, many of you will have, I thought of you when I was actually putting this lecture together, many of you will have sailed from Australia to England, and you would have called into Colombo. Anyone called into Colombo? Yeah. You went up to Candy? Yeah. And you went, many of you will have gone to the Gallface Hotel, which has been beautifully refurbished. There is the famous checkerboard bar on the lawn, overlooking the pool and the Indian Ocean. And I remember the first time I went there, I was much younger, and I came out of the hotel. In fact, I walked over that checkerboard area there, and I walked out to the pool and I had a swim. I looked at the sea, which was churning up against the coast. I thought, that's a bit dangerous. And I called the waiter over and I said, I'm going to have a swim. Is it safe? Sir, do not worry. He went to a palm tree, and there was a wire going to the palm tree, and there was a black telephone on it. And he actually picked up the receiver and wound the handle, said something which I didn't understand, bonked it down. All of a sudden, the man appeared in swimming trunks with a towel and got up into the lifeguard's tow. And he turned to me very calmly and said, the lifeguard will observe you while you take this. As we go on, just another spot which was a real, I hadn't been to Kerala, to the beautiful lakes, so we spent this wonderful day sailing through the lakes of Kerala this year. This has all happened in this year, I should add. And then, of course, I just might throw in one of my favourite Indian palace hotels, which is the Lake Palace in Udaipur. Has anyone stayed there? Yes, and you know the film? James Bond? Octopussy. And this palace, this is the Lake Palace in the middle of the lake, the city palace behind it. And really interestingly, the Maharaja sent his young son to Melbourne to go to William Anglis to learn the art of hotel management. He's really planning for the future. But look at that wonderful garden. And there it is, Octopussy with Roger Moore. That takes us back quite a few years. Looking towards the Monsoon Palace, where the evil character lived. And indeed, my private terrace at the hotel, as you do. I was in the mother-in-law suite. So I went through the doorway, and what do I find? There's this beautiful suite. And with no mother-in-law, I might say. And a gorgeous bed. with a magnificent painted ceiling that did send you to sleep eventually. And this is what this hotel has been created out of an old palace. So refashioning something beautiful into something which is contemporary and relevant. And just one of my private balconies for me and my mother-in-law, and the lovely central courtyard. So this is, it's not the reality. And this lovely inner courtyard with these beautiful water features, absolutely delightful. I did a cruise from Venice to Athens, and also one from Athens to Istanbul earlier this year, and the beautiful city of Split. Now, some of you will have been to Split. The most important reason why you would go to Split is where the red dot is actually the site of Diocletian's palace. And of course, he was one of the great Roman emperors who actually came from this region, went off to rule in Rome, came back to retire and continued ruling in a fashion. And today, we have an artist's visualization of what his palace is like, or what would have looked like. And today, that particular palace has been incorporated into the layers of history going through the Renaissance and the period of Venetian influence, etc. And you can wander these streets and you can experience a little bit of ancient Rome in what was the great Mediterranean Sea, which was, of course, the Roman lake when Rome controlled every part of the shore of the Mediterranean. This is why I travel. It's moments like this when you see beautiful reminders of the past. And then going to the Bay of Kotor in Montenegro, you sail through the entrance of the harbour, and look at that bay. It's like a Norwegian fjord. And at the end of it, you have a little town which has walls built by the Venetians. But as you sail through this lake, I look for little historical moments. You come down, big cruise ships come sailing in as well, and there's the town just here on the shore. But you pass by things that really do remind you of how generations behave over time. Just in the side of a hill, as you go through the entrance to this huge bay, you find these tunnels. These tunnels were constructed by the Nazis in World War II to hide their U-boats. And just brings you into a contemporary context. And then you see the beautiful village itself sitting at the end of the harbour, or the bay. Past the Our Lady of the Reef Church, and normally when I travel on a small ship, someone will rush out from the church and they'll ring the bell and we will answer with the ship's siren. So there's a lovely little conversation. Not as good as the bell that's here at Graduate House. If you're going to Athens, there's a new museum, the Acropolis Museum, which sits below the Acropolis, and it's a reminder to the rest of the world that England has most of the good chunk of the Elgin marbles. And what's interesting, they've actually recreated the wall panels up the top of the museum in that glass box, and they actually have on them all of the pieces that Greece still has, and they have terracotta pieces. In small writing, it's got B in British Museum. And if British Museum gave back their bits, it would be a really, I'd say about half of it, maybe even 2/3 of it would be complete. It was really telling the world that we, the Greeks, would be capable of looking after our own artefacts. That is a wonderful debate for anyone working in the field of museology. The museum itself is fantastic. When it was constructed in Athens, they found so many ruins that they had to accommodate the ruins within the development of the museum. See how it reflects that great, wonderful temple at the top of the hill, the Acropolis. And there you can see how they've incorporated the ancient ruins of Athens as they've built the museum itself. Really marvellous stuff, just a few. And they've got the original statues from the site in the museum. They've got copies up on the real site because they've actually got to try and protect them. Perfect set of buttocks on that much more naturalistic image there. And it's interesting because you look at Greek sculpture and you go back to the Egyptian sculpture, and the Egyptian sculpture has a full melon. and the Greek sculpture starts to be a little bit more naturalistic, and when Rome starts, they get more naturalistic. And when you get to the Baroque, we're getting very naturalistic. And then by that stage, things are breaking off. That was 101 art done in 30 seconds. And they reflect some of the imagery on the walls at night. Continuing on, just to throw this in, the wonderful side of Ephesus. Many of you will have been there making that journey down the hill. Fantastic Roman architecture, but of course it has a history that goes back much longer. And the famous symbol of Nike, which inspired, of course, the corporate logo for the Nike sportswear company, the symbol of victory. And then, of course, the great library of Celsus, the Roman senator who built a grand library. Today we have the facade and quite a lot of the interior. You can see the slots where they put the rolls, the scroll rolls. And indeed, across the road, it's very handy if you go into a library, is a very conveniently located brothel. And it's all about, you know, a complete intellectual and physical experience in the true spirit of ancient Rome. Do remember that in ancient Rome, the idea of going to a place where you could enjoy the bath was more about social interaction. And of course, don't forget, if you go home and Google, some of you can Google, because I know you sneak it, you look at your phones, you look up the word symposium, that actually means drinking party. One of the people who has impacted upon my life, because I've travelled to so many places, is Frank Gehry. This is his first major building using that metallic surface, and that is the University Art Museum, the Weissman Museum in Minneapolis. And he was inspired literally by picking up a piece of tin foil and screwing it into a ball and trying to lay it out flat to create this uneven juxtaposition of shapes and angles. This went on, of course, to see the development of the great Guggenheim Museum in the city of Bilbao in northern Spain, which is a wonderful piece of urban renewal which has led to the redevelopment of an entire city which was losing its manufacturing industry. And then he went on, I'll just get past this Guggenheim Museum, which is like a giant metallic flower that's opening up. He goes on to create the Disney Symphony Hall in the city of Los Angeles. So he's becoming more and more bold. And then, of course, more recently, if you've been to Paris in the last few weeks, only earlier this year, maybe just late last year, the Louis Vuitton company opened the Foundation Louis Vuitton, which is in the beautiful park between La Défense and the Eiffel Tower. And it's a giant metallic structure with glass and water. This is the new museum in Paris, which is causing an absolute sensation. And of course, great auditorium for presentations and really quite dramatic art. A wall of Kandinsky's, quite fantastic. As we continue, and I thought I'd just throw a bit of one of my favourite architects, not necessarily the most practical architect, but a beautiful, inspired character. Just any architects in the room? One. There's, well, I always say the marriage between the client and the architect is an interesting one, full of all the true aspects of a marriage between an architect and a client. And it's interesting when you look at this building, which was designed by Anton Gaudi, who unfortunately was struck by a tram. And please be safe when you go home. He wasn't recognised, not because he was mangled, because he was quite down and out towards the end of his life, but he created a number of beautiful buildings in the city of Barcelona. This is Casa Mila, which has that grand organic quality. And I'm just going to flip through this slide very quickly. The entry foyer, you can see the organic shape and movement, a bit disconcerting if you like straight lines and things like that. The chimney pots, which all have personalities, and going up the internal courtyard staircase, absolutely marvellous. The juxtaposition of architecture and vegetation. One of the apartments which has been retained, look at the curvature of the sideboard, the legs, the table. It's like an episode of Antiques Roadshow. Beautiful spaces, and I'll just flip through these just to give you a look at the bathroom. And I love this window. That looks into the hall foyer, and that's the central courtyard of the building. Many of you will have stayed in traditional buildings in European cities where you've got a square courtyard and you know everybody else's business, but look at that shape, isn't it fantastic? continuing on looking up at night from the base of that courtyard. And we'll just keep going a little bit further. Now, the great monument that is, of course, St. Peter's in Rome. I didn't put the arms in. Drawing the arms of Bernini drawing into the heart of the Catholic Church. And I don't want to cause any offence in the room, but the true nature of the theatricality of religion is demonstrated. Bernini was also a theatre designer and did sets, so he did some really wonderful backdrops to altars in churches of Rome. But then, of course, the light comes in. And I remember driving with an aunt of mine all the way up to Dimboola, where I was born. Does anyone know Dimboola? And we're driving up on an afternoon to the west, and the sun was shining, and the clouds were there, and the light came through. I can remember my aunt, she was very Christian, she said, "Kenneth, when you see that, now you know there's a God. You are blessed." I didn't disagree, and it was rather beautiful. I am a bit of a grand tourist. I love touring, and this is a work by a man called Panini. Not the thing that you eat, but the man that used to paint paintings for those who did the grand tour to Europe, particularly from England. And you can see a group of aristocrats in the centre of that image, all enjoying the opportunity of buying artworks to take back to their palaces and houses elsewhere in Europe. The idea of you go to massage your mind, but of course many of them were distracted by the delights of strolling late at night around the Colosseum. I won't go any further. And then, what is spirituality? I don't personally think that St. Peter's, for me, does, in a way, doesn't have any spiritual impact. Because it's full of tourists, it's an extraordinary showcase of the majesty of the church, etc. This little church is at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's their formal chapel, designed by an architect called Saarinen, of course from Scandinavia, and it's surrounded by a moat, and it's the most extraordinary experience. I'm not particularly religious, but when you go in this building, your breath is taken away. And it's hundreds and hundreds of little metal plates move in the air above the oculus, which allows the light to come in, illuminating the beautiful altar. And it's the most sublime experience. And imagine if you're going to be married there. Continuing on, we come to the beautiful city of New York. I remind you, I've seen all of these in the first 6 months this year. This, if you go to New York, an old railway line which is elevated called the High Line. Has anyone walked along that yet? Yeah. It's absolutely fantastic. It's several kilometres long, it's been fully extended, and you walk along and it goes right under this hotel which is called the Standard, which is very expensive, but if you've got some money to spare, go up into the roof and enjoy the wonderful view at the cocktail party with the beautiful people. I stayed a very short time. And there is the railway line. You can see how it's been turned into an integrated urban development. These are the things that drive me to travel, because there's always something to look and admire. Here we have the brand new Whitney Art Museum, which has just been opened. Absolutely fantastic. Inside, stunning exhibits. I got that photo on my iPhone. I love the attendant walking across under the Calder sculpture. Of course, down the road you've got the grand building, which is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I go there as a sort of pilgrimage every time I go to New York, where you can see a little bit of a temple that's been brought from Egypt in the comfort of an air-conditioned environment, near a restaurant, and hopefully a safe environment. And then, of course, I love the amusement of history. The Grand Hall of Armour. They have a great collection of armour. But if you look upon this suit of armour, you know by the portly presentation, it certainly would suit me, but it suited Henry VIII. And that's somehow found its way into the collection of this great museum. Earlier this year I took a tour to Falling Water, and Frank Lloyd Wright was an inspired character, but not the world's most practical architect. A good Frank Lloyd Wright building is distinguished by a leaking roof and low ceilings, but certainly inspiring architecture, this beautiful house, Falling Water. And then to go to the Channel Islands, and you can still have an honesty box and buy your Jersey Royal potatoes, the best potatoes in the world, if you ask me. And a simple little church. Does anyone remember Boots Chemist in England? Yeah. Jesse Boot became, the man that founded Boots Chemist, became Lord Trent of Nottingham. He gave a huge amount of money to the University of Nottingham. And when he died, his wife was so devastated that she actually created a memorial church in Jersey. And it's called the Glass Church. You walk in, it's very simple, it's very much the modern of the 1930s. And as you go in, you find the most beautiful glass. Now, can anyone guess that glass maker? Lalique. And the whole building is filled with this beautiful collection of Lalique. Marvellous triple of the lilies there. And there are a number of... actually, whenever I look for the information on these saints, I don't actually identify them. They don't seem to have them listed. But these wonderful spiritual figures that have that luminosity, which is really quite incredible. And then whilst I was there 2 or 3 years ago, they found this. It's not a coffin. It is one of the world's, actually I think it still is the world's largest hoard to be found. And you can see the size of this, this archaeologist is a wonderful character. That is literally all these coins and objects stuck together, buried, hidden away, so it wouldn't be stolen by, say, a Viking or something like that. And it's filled with coins from ancient Rome, coins and objects which have all been preserved in the ground, discovered by somebody using a metal detector. Victor Hugo, who fell out of favour with the monarch, he was very much a monarchist. Then he switched over to be an anti-monarchist in France, had to decamp from the city of Paris, and he lived on Place de Vosges, which must have been very unfortunate for him to move from there. He went to Jersey first and eventually went to Guernsey. He went with his wife and family and the mistress, of course, as you do, and lived in this grand, spectacular house. Now, this is a very good way you could decorate your home. There's the family party. The mistress, I don't know where she is, but she'll be conveniently located. The interior is extraordinary. It's eclectic. Wonderful timber-panelled walls, beautiful tapestries and cloths, and this is one of the main reception rooms. That's all done in material, ladies and gentlemen, and that is the ceiling of the main reception room. Absolutely fantastic, and it's just incredibly eclectic. And it says so much about the man, Victor Hugo, who wrote some of his most famous works whilst he was, in a way, sent away from France. Sent away because if he had stayed in Paris, he most likely would have got into trouble with Napoleon III. They're wonderful spaces. And one of the buildings which was mentioned, the haunted house, which became part of one of the stories that he wrote. So he really enjoyed this environment. I popped into Berlin on the way through the wonderful Brandenburg Gate, beautiful area that's been restored in the centre of the city. And you might recall that Napoleon, when he saw the Brandenburg Gate, said, "I want that quadriga on top." It was taken off the top and sent to Paris to be put on top of a monument. And unfortunately for Napoleon, he met someone called Wellington, 200 years since the battle, and it never got on top of a monument in Paris. It was brought back and it's back on this monument. And then, of course, many of you will have been to the magnificent Lord Norman Foster dome on the Reichstag. Wonderful building with this great funnel. It sits over the lower house of the German Parliament. The funnel extracts the hot air that's regularly generated by the politicians. Flipping to Paris, if you're in Paris, it's a bit touristy now, but it's wonderful. Go to Gare de Lyon and go to the Blue Train restaurant. Yeah. Get someone else to pay for it. That is my great recommendation in life. Or indeed to go down the road to Bowfinger. Once again, get someone else to pay for it. Just the most wonderful Parisian experiences. Back in London, my favourite museum in London is the National Portrait Gallery. Beautiful spaces, and the thing is, go there, but go to the top of the building and take in the view over Trafalgar Square. There you can see Nelson's Column, the dome on the front of the National Gallery, the beautiful tower, Big Ben, over in the distance, the magnificent Roman Catholic Cathedral. In fact, I was taken through that cathedral by the organist and head chorister through the back of the building, and it was just the most wonderful experience. It's an interesting little note that Adolf Hitler quite admired Nelson. And there is a story that, and I really should check this out properly, that he actually instructed the Luftwaffe to avoid bombing Nelson's column because he wanted to extract that once he'd taken over England and taken it back to Germany. And then my friend, who happened to be a plastic surgeon, and I actually had to pay, well, I paid for my half of the meal. We went to Simpson's in the Strand. Has anyone been there?
Yeah.
My meal was $280. The most elegant surround. Sometimes you just got to throw caution to the wind and common sense. And it was the most extraordinary meal where I actually watched. In the old days when restaurants, they used to fillet the fish.
Yeah.
And I had a Dover sole that was filleted and flipped over and presented on the plate with a round of applause from all the diners because it was the most sensational experience. That is the roast beef. I would defy, actually, I have to say, the meat that we ate today was absolutely superb. I think we should give the chef a round of applause. I am coming to an end. Are you still with me for another 5 or so minutes? Yeah. I was taken to the SAS Club, Special Forces Club, and on the walls where there were literally 150, 200 images of members of the SAS, male, but female as well. And because there were lots of members of the SAS who were involved with spy organisation. It was very interesting because when I went there, it's a funny little place, and there's a sign on the bar. It's a bit like the philosophy of the Graduate House. You shouldn't let anyone be alone. You should talk to people. You should engage with people. And on the bar, the sign says, there's someone standing to your right or left. Talk to them.
Oh.
And what was interesting, I went off to wash my hands and I came back and I was looking at, and there were quite a few Australians on the wall. And someone came up and chatted and said, oh, you must come and meet the chaps. I'm with Special Branch, he's with MI5, and so I met all these characters. You know, it was like being in one of those episodes of, you know, in Cold War era. And they've all retired, but they've been brought back because of their detective skills given the world that we live in. Another club which I like in London, near the beautiful Ritz Hotel, is the Arts Club. And I remind you, I'm sure that there's plenty of reciprocal clubs that Graduate House has as well. This is a private club, and you go, they've juxtaposed contemporary art with the traditional setting, and wonderful spaces to enjoy, and a beautiful courtyard in the back. You don't have to wear a tie, you can use your mobile phone, you can do all these sorts of things. But don't let the waiter select the wine. Let's have a glass of red. So we had 3 glasses of red each, and it was £22 a glass of red. And we enjoyed ourselves. We needed another bottle after that. Just quickly, I went to Petra, and that's me standing in front of the Treasury, which of course, one of the great corrections of life, it was actually an necropolis, not a treasury. But when the local tribes people actually obtained guns, they actually shot at this building, trying to see whether gold would fall out of the walls, as it always been the reputation. And as I come to the end of the lecture, of course, there's nothing you should avoid. I'm having a beauty treatment on the Dead Sea. And I'm covered in Dead Sea mud. Can't you see my beautiful complexion? This kid came up, and I'm staying at the Kempinski Palace Hotel, as you do, and he came up with a bucket of warm Dead Sea mud and just slopped it all over me. And you stand around for about half an hour, then you go back into the Dead Sea and it sort of falls off you and your skin tingles. It was quite an extraordinary experience. Anyway, to finish, I live in one of the great cities of the world. I've been very privileged to be a resident of Melbourne for most of my life. I have a great passion for the university, and I do mean this in the most generous way, that we have a great set of universities. We have a great city which really enjoys the arts, the culture, the ethnic diversity. We live in a wonderful, wonderful place. And I always enjoy coming home to Melbourne, and I like the contrast of being away and being here. So I do love this city very, very much. I'm going to be a little bit naughty, but I've asked the lady in charge of the bell, and I've got my hand in the bell so she can't ring it, just to say that I do a lot of things in Melbourne. I do a lot of lectures and talks. I'll give you a business card if you want to go on my mailing list. But in a couple of weeks on October the 20th, I'm doing a little soiree at the Savage Club. We're raising money to help students at Annan. And if anyone would like to come along, I can give you a booking form. It's for a couple of hours, it's a lovely supper, and it's a really great event. But folks, being back in Melbourne is always a pleasure, especially when I sit at my window admiring my view with the two great things in life, a martini and a wonderful view. And I love it when the Catholics ring the bell as on cue. The two go together. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time.